He threw the papers on the table, laughing as he told her she was worth nothing. He told her that her cheap clothes and quiet demeanor were an embarrassment to his rising career. He thought he was trading up, leaving his boring housewife for the flashy daughter of his CEO. But Mark Sterling made a fatal miscalculation. He didn't check who his wife really was. He didn't know that the woman scrubbing his floors was actually Titan Vanderbilt, the secret sole heiress to the very empire he worked for. And the moment he signed those papers, he didn't just end a marriage. He signed his own death warrant. The fluorescent light in the kitchen flickered, casting a sickly yellow glow over the small, laminate table. It was raining outside, a typical gloomy Tuesday in Seattle, matching the atmosphere inside the cramped apartment on 4th Avenue. Mark Sterling adjusted his tie, a knockoff silk blend he'd bought to impress his superiors, and slid the manila envelope across the table. It hit the salt shaker with a dull thud. "Just sign it, Titan. Don't make this difficult," Mark said, his voice dripping with a mix of exhaustion and arrogance. He didn't even look at her. He was too busy checking his reflection in the darkened window, making sure his hair was perfectly coiffed. Titan sat opposite him. She wore a simple, oversized grey cardigan that had seen better days, her hair tied back in a messy bun. To the outside world, and apparently to her husband of 3 years, she looked like a woman who had given up. A woman whose only ambition was keeping this tiny apartment clean and dinner warm. "Is there really no other way, Mark?" Titan asked softly. Her voice wasn't pleading. It was calm, almost terrifyingly steady, though Mark was too self-absorbed to notice the difference. "Titan, look at you," Mark scoffed, gesturing vaguely at her. "And then look at me. I'm a senior analyst at Rothschild & Co. now. I'm going places. I have dinners with executives. I have galas in the Hamptons to attend next month. And you're just—" "I'm just your wife," she finished for him. "You're an anchor," Mark corrected, his tone harsh. "I need someone who fits my future. Jessica fits my future." Titan looked down at the papers. Jessica Thorne, the daughter of the regional director at Mark's firm. She was loud, she wore too much Gucci, and she had been flirting with Mark at the company Christmas party right in front of Titan. "She's pregnant, isn't she?" Titan asked, picking up the pen. Mark froze for a second, then puffed out his chest. "Yes, and she can give me things you can't. Connections, status, a father-in-law who can make me a partner by 30. You barely scraped by with that waitressing job when we met. I tried to save you, Titan. I really did. But you're just not elite material." Titan uncapped the pen. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. It wasn't a smile of sadness. It was the smile of someone watching a child play with a loaded gun. "You're right, Mark," she whispered. "I'm not the material you think I am." "What was that?" "Nothing," she said, louder this time. "I hope you get everything you deserve." She pressed the pen to the paper. Titan Sterling. With a quick, fluid motion, she signed the divorce decree. She waived her right to alimony. She waived her claim on their shared assets, which mostly consisted of Mark's leased BMW and his debts anyway. She left with exactly what she came in with. Nothing. Or so he thought. "Done," she said, sliding the papers back. Mark snatched them up, a grin spreading across his face. He checked the signature, relief washing over him. "Finally. You should really find a man more your speed. Maybe a mechanic or a barista? Someone simple?" He stood up, checking his watch, a flashy chronograph he'd bought on credit. "I'm meeting Jessica at Le Bernardin. I need to pack a bag. I'll be out by tonight. You can keep the lease. I paid rent through the end of the month. Consider it a parting gift." He walked into the bedroom, whistling. Titan remained at the kitchen table. She listened to the sound of him throwing clothes into a suitcase. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She reached into the pocket of her frayed cardigan and pulled out a phone. It wasn't the cracked iPhone 8 Mark allowed her to use. It was a sleek, black satellite phone, the kind used by heads of state and military contractors. She dialed a single number. "Status?" A deep voice answered instantly on the other end. "It's done, Arthur," Titan said. Her voice changed instantly. The meekness was gone, replaced by a cold, commanding authority that would have made Mark's blood run cold. "The divorce is signed. He's leaving now." "Very good, madame," Arthur replied. "The board of directors has been waiting for your signal. The acquisition of Rothschild & Co. is pending your final authorization. Shall we proceed?" Titan looked at the closed bedroom door, listening to Mark humming as he packed to leave her for a woman he thought was rich. "Proceed," Titan said. "Buy it all. And Arthur, bring the car around. I'm tired of playing the poor housewife." Mark left 20 minutes later. He didn't say goodbye. He just dragged his suitcase to the door, paused to look at the apartment with disdain one last time, and walked out. He didn't notice that Titan was already standing by the window, watching him get into his Uber. Once his taillights disappeared around the corner, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted. Titan stood up and walked to the small, rusted closet in the hallway. She reached to the very back, behind the cleaning supplies and old coats, and pulled out a locked, sleek metal briefcase. She scanned her thumbprint. The locks clicked open with a hiss. Inside lay a different life. A platinum Patek Philippe watch encrusted with diamonds, a heavy signet ring bearing the crest of the Blackwood Vanderbilt Consortium, and a black American Express Centurion card, the black card that has no limit. She stripped off the grey cardigan and the cheap leggings Mark had always criticized. From the briefcase, she pulled out a tailored black dress, simple but cut from Italian silk, that cost more than Mark's annual salary. She let her hair down, shaking out the golden waves she had kept hidden in a severe bun for 3 years. She walked out of the apartment building, leaving the door unlocked. She wouldn't be coming back. The rain was pouring down harder now, soaking the cracked pavement of 4th Avenue. But as Titan stepped onto the curb, she didn't get wet. A man in a pristine black suit had appeared from the shadows, holding a large umbrella over her head. "Good evening, Madame Vanderbilt," the man said, bowing his head slightly. This was Arthur, her family's head of security and her personal butler for over 20 years. "Arthur," she acknowledged, stepping towards the curb. Waiting there was not a taxi, but a line of 3 black SUVs flanking a custom Rolls-Royce Phantom. The Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament gleamed under the streetlights, looking out of place in this run-down neighborhood. Passers-by stopped and stared. A neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, who usually complained about Titan's trash bins, stood on her porch with her mouth open, dropping her grocery bag. Arthur opened the rear door of the Phantom. The interior smelled of aged leather and expensive mahogany. "Where to, madame? The estate?" Arthur asked as he closed the door, shutting out the noise of the city. "No," Titan said, settling into the seat and pouring herself a glass of sparkling water from the car's chiller. "Take me to the Four Seasons. I need a spa treatment and a stylist. Tomorrow morning I have a board meeting at Rothschild & Company." Arthur looked at her in the rear-view mirror, a knowing glint in his eye. "Mark Sterling works there, does he not?" "He does," Titan replied, taking a sip of the water. "He thinks he's about to get a promotion from his future father-in-law. I think it's time I introduced myself to his boss." "And what about his fiancée, Miss Thorne?" "Jessica?" Titan laughed softly, a sound that lacked any humor. "Jessica's father, Mr. Thorne, is a middle manager. He manages a branch. He doesn't own the company, Arthur. I own the company, or I will by 9 a.m. tomorrow." She looked out the tinted window as the Rolls-Royce glided away from the curb, leaving the life of Titan Sterling behind forever. "I spent 3 years trying to be loved for who I was, not what I owned," she whispered to the glass. "I cooked, I cleaned, I supported him when he was an unpaid intern. I wanted to know if a man could love me without the money." She turned back to Arthur. "Now I have my answer. He wanted gold. So I'm going to show him exactly how heavy gold can be when it falls on you. The clinking of fine crystal and the low hum of polite conversation filled Le Bernardin, one of Manhattan's most exclusive seafood restaurants. It was a world away from the cramped apartment in Seattle, where Mark had left his wife just hours earlier. Mark sat opposite Jessica Thorne, feeling like the king of the world. He wore a new Brioni suit he couldn't really afford, but he knew his upcoming promotion would cover it. Jessica was glowing, or perhaps it was just the shimmer of the diamond earrings Mark had bought her on credit. She was loud, laughing a little too enthusiastically at her own jokes, drawing glances from neighboring tables. "Oh my God, babe, did you see the look on that waiter's face when I sent back the caviar?" Jessica giggled, taking a large gulp of the $500 bottle of Dom Perignon Mark had ordered. It was definitely not Osetra. I mean, do they think I'm stupid? Mark laughed along, though he wouldn't know Osetra caviar from fish bait. "You tell 'em, Jess. Only the best for us from now on." "Exactly," she said, leaning over the table, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "So did you do it? Is the dead weight gone?" Mark swirled his champagne. "Signed, sealed, and delivered. Titan is officially in the rear-view mirror. Left her the lease on that dump, so she shouldn't complain." Jessica smirked cruelly. God, she was so beige, you know? Just there. I don't know how you survived 3 years with someone who buys their clothes at Walmart. "I was just being a good guy, trying to help her out," Mark lied, rewriting history to suit his new narrative. "But you can't help people who don't want to rise up. Anyway, forget her. Let's talk about us. Has your dad said anything more about the partner track?" Jessica waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, Daddy loves you. He said as soon as the quarterly review is done next week, he's moving you up. Corner office, expense account, the works. We are going to run that company, Mark." Mark felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. The dream. A waiter approached, placing a sleek black leather folder on the table. The bill. Mark snatched it up confidently. He didn't even look at the total. He just pulled out his corporate American Express Platinum card, the one he wasn't technically supposed to use for personal dinners, but who cared? He was practically a partner. "Put a 20% tip on there," Mark said magnanimously. The waiter took the folder and walked away. Mark and Jessica continued planning their future. A penthouse in Tribeca, a summer rental in the Hamptons, maybe a Porsche for Jessica. 5 minutes passed. The waiter returned. He looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I apologize, but there seems to be an issue with the card." Mark frowned. "What issue? Run it again. It's a corporate card." "We did, sir. It was declined. The message says Administrator Freeze." Jessica rolled her eyes. Daddy probably put a hold on department spending for the end of the quarter. Just use your personal one, babe." Mark felt a bead of sweat trickle down his neck. His personal credit was maxed out from buying Jessica the earrings and his new suit. He pulled out his personal visa anyway, praying there was enough of a buffer left. The waiter took it. He returned 2 minutes later. His expression was even tighter. "Declined, sir. Insufficient funds." The silence at the table was deafening. Jessica's smile vanished. "Mark," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "this is embarrassing. Do you not have any money?" "Of course I do," Mark hissed, his face turning red. "It must be a bank error. I just transferred funds yesterday." He was lying. "We can try another card," the waiter suggested weakly. "I don't have another card on me," Mark snapped. He looked at Jessica. "Babe, can you get this one? I'll wire you the cash first thing in the morning when I sort this out with the bank." Jessica stared at him in disbelief. The facade of the adoring fiancé cracked. "Are you serious? You bring me to a 3-star Michelin restaurant to celebrate dumping your poor wife, and you want me to pay? That is so tacky, Mark." She aggressively dug into her Gucci purse and threw her own credit card at the waiter. Just take it. God. Mark felt about 2 inches tall. Jess, I'm sorry. It's just a technical glitch. Whatever, she huffed, pulling out her phone and scrolling through Instagram, ignoring him. Suddenly, Jessica's phone started vibrating violently on the table. It was her father, Roger Thorne. She answered, annoyed. Daddy? We're at dinner. What is it? Mark watched as the colour drained from Jessica's face. Her jaw dropped. What? Slow down. I can't understand you. Who? What do you mean, escorted out? She looked up at Mark, her eyes wide with genuine panic. Daddy, what are you talking about? What happened to the company? She listened for another 10 seconds, then dropped the phone onto the table. It clattered against the empty champagne flute. Jess? What's wrong? Mark asked, reaching for her hand. She snatched her hand away as if he were contagious. She pointed a trembling finger towards the bar area near the entrance of the restaurant. A large television screen was tuned to Bloomberg TV. Mark turned around. The bright red banner across the bottom of the screen read, Breaking News. The anchor was speaking urgently. Financial shockwaves this evening as the secretive Blackwood Vanderbilt Consortium has announced a hostile takeover of Rothschild and Company. The deal, rumored to be executed in a matter of hours today, has resulted in the immediate suspension of Rothschild's entire executive board, pending an internal audit by the new ownership. Mark felt the room spin. Blackwood Vanderbilt, who are they? Jessica was hyperventilating. They're like the financial mafia, Mark. Nobody knows who runs it. They buy companies, strip them down, and fire everyone. She looked at him with pure venom. My dad just got fired. Security just escorted him out of the building. He said all employee accounts have been frozen. That's why your card didn't work, you idiot. Fired? But Roger is a regional director, Mark stammered, his dreams crumbling in real time. If he's out, what about my promotion? Jessica grabbed her purse and stood up. Your promotion? Mark, my dad is going to jail if that audit finds the kickbacks he's been taking. Our assets are probably going to be seized. I don't have time for your promotion. Where are you going? Mark pleaded, standing up too. I'm going home to deal with real problems, she spat. Don't follow me, and figure out how to pay me back for dinner. She stalked out of the restaurant, leaving Mark alone at a table covered in expensive remnants of a celebration that had just turned into a wake for his career. He looked at the TV screen again. The anchor continued. The identity of the sole heiress to the Blackwood Vanderbilt fortune remains a closely guarded secret, but sources say she has personally arrived in the city to oversee the dismantling of Rothschild's current leadership. Mark slumped into his chair. He had no wife, he had no girlfriend, and it looked like by tomorrow morning he would have no job. He just didn't know that the person holding the axe was the woman he'd left in the rain hours earlier. The lobby of Rothschild & Co.'s towering glass headquarters in downtown Seattle was usually a cathedral of hushed efficiency. Today, it was a disaster zone. It was 8:45 a.m. Mark had barely slept. He was wearing the same suit from the night before, now wrinkled, and his eyes were bloodshot. He stood near the security turnstiles, nursing a lukewarm coffee, surrounded by dozens of other panicked employees, whispering nervously. I heard they fired the CEO at 3 a.m. via email, one junior analyst whispered. I heard the new owner is some ancient European billionaire who hates Americans, another replied. Mark spotted Roger Thorne, Jessica's father, near the elevators. Roger looked 20 years older than he had yesterday. His usually pristine suit was disheveled, and he was sweating profusely despite the air conditioning. Jessica was next to him, looking pale and angry, refusing to make eye contact with Mark. Mark walked over to them, desperate for any information that could save his skin. Roger, Jessica, Mark said, trying to sound confident. What's the latest? Surely this is just a shake-up at the very top. Middle management and senior analysts like us should be fine, right? Roger glared at Mark. You fool. Nobody is fine. My access badge doesn't work. My computer is locked remotely. They are scrubbing everything. But who are they? Jessica demanded, her voice shrill. Who does this to people? Before Roger could answer, the massive revolving doors at the front of the lobby stopped moving. The ambient noise in the lobby died instantly. 4 large men in tailored black suits entered first. They weren't normal building security. These men moved with the disciplined precision of Secret Service agents. They fanned out, securing the pathway from the door to the executive elevator bank. Then Arthur walked in. He stood tall, impeccable in his suit, looking around the lobby with an air of distaste, as if he smelled something unpleasant. Finally she entered. The woman who walked through the doors bore no resemblance to the Titan Sterling who had scrubbed Mark's toilet yesterday. This woman was wearing a structured white Alexander McQueen power suit that accentuated her height and authority. Her hair, no longer a messy bun, was a cascade of perfectly styled golden waves that caught the lobby lights. She wore oversized dark sunglasses and carried a Hermes Birkin bag made of Himalayan crocodile skin, a bag worth more than Mark's entire 4-year cumulative salary. She walked with a confident, predatory stride, looking neither left nor right. The sound of her Jimmy Choo stilettos clicking on the marble floor echoed like gunshots in the silent lobby. A gasp rippled through the crowd. People recognized the power, the wealth dripping off her, even if they didn't know her face yet. Mark stared, his brain short-circuited. He recognized the walk, he recognized the chin. But it was impossible. Titan? He whispered, the word barely escaping his throat. He pushed past Roger and took a few steps towards the center aisle where she was walking. Titan didn't stop. She didn't even turn her head. Titan! Mark called out louder, confusion and a bizarre sense of ownership overtaking his fear. Titan, what are you doing here? You can't just walk in here like this. He stepped directly into her path, blocking her. The 4 security guards instantly closed in, but Titan held up a hand, stopping them. She slowly took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were cold, harder than diamonds. She looked at Mark not with anger, but with the total indifference one might show a cockroach on the sidewalk. "Excuse me," she said, her voice crystal clear, carrying through the silent lobby. "Do I know you?" Mark was stunned. "Do you know me? Titan, stop playing games. It's me, Mark, your husband. Well, ex-husband as of yesterday. Look, I know you're upset about the divorce. But dressing up and crashing my office isn't going to win me back. You're making a scene. You need to leave before security throws you out." Roger Thorne stepped up beside Mark, trying to exert his last shred of authority. "Yes, young lady, this is private property. I don't know who you think you are, but you are trespassing during a corporate crisis." Titan looked from Mark to Roger, a dry smile touching her lips. "Arthur," she said calmly, without looking away from them. Arthur stepped forward, holding an iPad. "Yes, Madame Vanderbilt." The name hit the lobby like a bomb. Vanderbilt. Mark's jaw dropped. Jessica let out a small squeak of horror. Roger looked like he was having a heart attack. "Vanderbilt?" Mark stammered. "What? No. Your name is Titan Sterling. Your maiden name was Titan Davis. You worked at a diner. My name," she corrected him, her voice icy, "is Titan Sophia Blackwood Vanderbilt. Davis was the name on the fake ID I used to see what it was like to live a normal life. To find someone who loved me for me." She took a step closer to Mark, invading his personal space. The scent of impossibly expensive perfume washed over him. "I found you, Mark. I thought you were different. I thought you were kind, ambitious, and real. But for 3 years I watched you turn into this." She gestured vaguely at his wrinkled suit and desperate face. A shallow, grasping little man, desperately trying to climb a ladder that I own. She turned to Roger Thorne, who was trembling. "Mr. Thorne, you are the regional director responsible for the Northwest Division, correct?" Yes, ma'am," Roger squeaked. "Arthur, what is the status of Mr. Thorne's employment?" she asked. Arthur tapped the iPad. As of 6 a.m. this morning, Mr. Thorne has been terminated for cause, citing gross negligence and embezzlement of company funds hidden in offshore vendor accounts. We have already forwarded the evidence to the FBI. Jessica screamed. Roger collapsed against the wall. Titan turned back to Mark, who was paralyzed with terror. "And you, Mark," she said softly, "my anchor. You wanted someone elite to help your career. Well, here I am. I'm the most elite person in this entire zip code." She leaned in close, so only he could hear the final nail in his coffin. "You wanted to trade up, darling. But you didn't realize you were already sleeping next to the bank, and you just overdrew your account forever." She straightened up, put her sunglasses back on, and brushed past him as if he didn't exist. "Come along, Arthur. We need to fumigate the executive suite before I occupy it." She walked towards the elevators, the doors parting instantly for her. Mark was left standing in the middle of the lobby, the eyes of hundreds of co-workers staring at the man who had unknowingly divorced a trillionaire owner of their company. The silence in the lobby following Titan's departure didn't last long. It was broken by the sound of sirens wailing outside, growing louder with every second. Mark stood rooted to the spot, his face burning. The whispers around him had turned into open jeers. He could hear snippets of conversation from the reception desk. "That's the guy? He dumped the owner? What a moron." Jessica was the first to snap. She shoved Mark hard in the chest, nearly knocking him over. "You idiot!" she shrieked, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "You said she was a nobody. You said she was a waitress who read too many books. She's a Vanderbilt, Mark. She owns half the city." "I didn't know," Mark yelled back, his voice cracking. "She never acted like this. She couponed, Jessica. She used coupons for laundry detergent. How was I supposed to know she was sitting on $1 trillion? Because you never looked at her," Jessica screamed. "And now look at us. My dad is—" She was cut off as the revolving doors spun again. This time it wasn't security. It was the FBI. 6 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with yellow letters moved in a tactical formation toward Roger Thorne. Roger, who was still slumped against the wall, clutching his chest, looked up with the eyes of a trapped animal. "Roger Thorne," the lead agent barked. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit corporate espionage." "I didn't do it alone," Roger blurted out, panic stripping away any loyalty he had. He pointed a shaking finger directly at Mark. "Him, Mark Sterling. He's my senior analyst. He signed off on the quarterly projections. He doctored the reports to hide the losses. He wanted the promotion." Mark felt the blood drain from his extremities. It was true that he had massaged some numbers at Roger's request, thinking it was just standard corporate maneuvering to boost bonuses. He didn't know he was covering up millions in stolen funds. "Wait, no," Mark stammered, as 2 agents broke off and marched toward him. "I was just following orders. I didn't know." "You can explain that to the federal prosecutor," the agent said, grabbing Mark's arm and spinning him around. The cold steel of handcuffs clicked onto his wrists that just minutes ago he thought would be wearing a Rolex given to him as a partner bonus. As Mark was frog-marched out of the building he had hoped to rule, he saw Jessica. She wasn't looking at him with concern. She was busy deleting photos of him from her phone, frantically typing, likely distancing herself from the criminal boyfriend. They dragged him past the reception desk. The receptionist, a woman Mark had rudely ignored every morning for 4 years, held up a cardboard box. "Mr. Sterling," she called out cheerfully, "I have your personal items from your desk. Security cleared it out 5 minutes ago. Don't worry, we kept the picture of your dog. We threw away the rest." Mark was shoved into the back of a government sedan. As the car pulled away, he looked up at the penthouse floor of the Rothschild building, now the Vanderbilt building. He saw a silhouette standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down. He couldn't be sure, but he thought he saw a hand raised in a small, dismissive wave. ______. underscore, 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 underscore. Later that evening, Mark was released on bail 12 hours later. His parents had to put up their retirement home as collateral. He walked out of the precinct, smelling of stale coffee and fear. He checked his phone. It was blowing up, but not with messages of support. Asterisk LinkedIn. Your account has been flagged for violation of community standards regarding professional conduct. Asterisk email. Notice of eviction. He remembered he had cancelled the lease on his new apartment deposit to pay for the lawyer. Asterisk. Text from Jessica. Don't ever contact me again. My lawyer says you're toxic. I'm telling everyone you manipulated my dad. Rot in hell. He had nowhere to go. His keycard to the office was dead. His bank accounts were frozen as part of the investigation. He had exactly $40 in his wallet. He realized he had only one option. The apartment on 4th Avenue. The lease he had graciously left to Titan. It was paid through the end of the month. She was rich now. Surely she was at the Four Seasons or some palace. The apartment would be empty. He took a bus. His BMW had been towed from the restaurant, back to the rainy, grim neighborhood he thought he had escaped. He ran up the stairs, fumbling for his old key. He jammed it into the lock and turned. It didn't budge. He tried again. Nothing. The lock had been changed. He pounded on the door. Titan, I know you're not in there. Open up. It's my house, too. The door to the neighboring apartment opened. Mrs. Higgins, the elderly woman in the floral housecoat, peered out. Stop that racket, you hooligan, she yelled. Mrs. Higgins, it's me, Mark. I need to get into my apartment. Not your apartment anymore, she spat. That nice lady, Mrs. Vanderbilt, she had the building superintendent change the locks this morning. Said she was donating the unit to a charity for battered women. Donating it? Mark slumped against the doorframe. But my stuff. My clothes that I didn't pack. My college diploma. She had a service. Come, Mrs. Higgins said with a gleeful cackle. They took everything that belonged to Mr. Sterling and put it on the curb about 4 hours ago. The garbage truck came at 5 o'clock. Mark ran to the window at the end of the hall and looked down at the alley. It was empty. His custom suits, his collection of vintage sneakers, his diploma, all gone to the dump. He slid down the wall, sitting on the dirty hallway floor. He was homeless. He was unemployed. He was facing federal charges. And he was starving. Then his phone buzzed. A notification from a news app. Vanderbilt heiress announces new charity initiative, the Sterling Grant, a fund dedicated to helping spouses recover from financial abuse and narcissistic partners. Mark threw his phone across the hall. It shattered against the opposite wall. 3 weeks later, Mark sat in the cramped office of Saul Goodman wannabe lawyer, Barry the Bulldog Higgins, no relation to the neighbor. The office smelled of cheap cologne and desperation. Mark looked terrible. He hadn't shaved in days. He was wearing a tracksuit he bought at a thrift store. So let me get this straight, Barry said, chewing on a toothpick. She's worth trillions. You were married for 3 years, no prenup? No prenup, Mark said, his eyes lighting up with a glimmer of hope. We were poor when we met, or I thought we were. She never declared her assets. That's fraud, right? She hid billions from me. Barry leaned back, clasping his hands behind his head. In the state of Washington, assets acquired during the marriage are community property. Inheritances are usually separate, unless commingled. Did she ever put Vanderbilt money into your joint account? She paid off my car once, Mark remembered, and she paid for a vacation to Cabo 2 years ago. Bingo! Barry slammed his hand on the desk. Commingling of funds. We can argue that she used the marital pot to manage her lifestyle, thereby opening her trust to scrutiny. We sue for spousal support. Lifestyle maintenance. You were accustomed to a certain standard of living, even if you didn't know who provided it. We ask for, let's say, $50 million. She'll settle for $10 million just to make us go away. Mark grinned. $10 million. It wasn't a trillion, but it was enough to disappear to Thailand and live like a king. Do it, Mark said. Serve her. Underscore, 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 underscore. 1 week later. The conference room. Mark didn't get a court date. He got a summons to a deposition at the headquarters of Vanderbilt Legal, a skyscraper that made his old office look like a shed. Mark walked in with Barry. He tried to strut, but the sheer opulence of the building intimidated him. The walls were lined with original Picassos. The carpet was thicker than his mattress. They were led into a conference room with a view of the entire Seattle skyline. Titan was there. She sat at the head of a long mahogany table. She wasn't wearing a suit today. She wore a simple, elegant navy dress that screamed old money. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. Flanking her were 5 lawyers in grey suits, typing silently on laptops. "Mr. Sterling," Titan said, not standing up. "And Mr. Higgins, is it? I believe your license was suspended in 2019 for ethics violations." Barry tugged at his collar. "That was reinstated, Miss Vanderbilt. We are here to discuss the settlement." "There will be no settlement," Titan said calmly. "Now listen here," Barry started, trying to bluster. "You committed fraud by concealment. You hid assets. My client has suffered emotional distress and financial ruin due to your deception. We want $50 million, or we take this to the press. Trillionaire deceived poor husband. The public will hate you." Titan laughed. It was a genuine, amused laugh. She tapped the intercom button. "Arthur, bring in the file." Arthur entered, carrying a single piece of paper inside a plastic protector. He placed it in front of Mark. "Do you recognize this, Mark?" Titan asked. Mark looked down. It was the divorce decree he had signed in the kitchen that rainy night. "Yeah, so. I signed it under duress. I didn't know the facts." "Read paragraph 4, subsection B," one of Titan's lawyers said sharply. Mark squinted at the fine print. "The undersigned, Mark Sterling, hereby knowingly and voluntarily waives any and all rights to discovery of assets, known or unknown, held by the petitioner, Titan. The undersigned acknowledges that he has mocked the petitioner's financial standing and specifically requests a clean break with no financial entanglements, explicitly stating, 'I want nothing from you but to be gone.'" Mark froze. He remembered saying that. He remembered laughing while he said it. You recorded that." "I record everything, Mark," Titan said, "and the document you signed. That wasn't a standard legal Zoom form. I had my team draft that 6 months ago, when I first realized you were cheating on me with Jessica. It's ironclad. You waived your right to my money, specifically because you were so sure I didn't have any." "But the commingling," Barry shouted. "You paid for his car." "From a joint account where I deposited my waitressing tips," Titan countered. "Not a penny of Vanderbilt money ever touched your accounts. My trustees made sure of that. I lived on minimum wage for 3 years to see if you were worth it. You weren't." Titan stood up. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Here is my counteroffer," she said. She slid a folder across the table. Mark opened it. It wasn't a check. It was a lawsuit. Titan Blackwood Vanderbilt versus Mark Sterling. Damages for emotional distress, defamation, and reimbursement of living expenses for 3 years. "I kept receipts, Mark," Titan said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Every rent check, every grocery bill, every time I paid for your dry cleaning while you were out with Jessica. You lived off me, the waitress, while you saved your salary for your affairs. I want it back, with interest." "I don't have any money," Mark screamed, tears of frustration stinging his eyes. "You know I don't." "Then I'll take your future," Titan said simply, "and this lawsuit will hang over you for the rest of your life. Every paycheck you earn, I will garnish. Every asset you buy, I will place a lien on. You will never own anything again until you pay me back every cent you took from the woman you called useless." She turned to walk away, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Mark, the FBI called. They found the emails where you authorized Roger's offshore transfers. You might want to save your energy for federal prison. I hear the accommodations are humble. Just your speed." She walked out. Arthur followed, closing the heavy oak door with a definitive click. Mark looked at Barry. Barry closed his briefcase. "I'm quitting. You can't pay me. Good luck, kid." Mark was left alone in the conference room, staring at the panoramic view of a city he used to think he could conquer, realizing he was now just a speck of dust on its windshield. The descent didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a cliff Mark fell off. It was a slow, suffocating slide into the mud. The week after the deposition at Vanderbilt Legal, the reality of Titan's counter-lawsuit hit Mark with the force of a freight train. He expected a settlement. He expected her to throw money at him just to make him go away. He hadn't calculated for the one variable that money couldn't buy, a woman's scorn. Titan didn't just sue him, she dismantled him. Her lawyers obtained an emergency freeze on his remaining assets, which amounted to a checking account with $412 and a 401k he had barely started. They garnished his wages before he even had a job to garnish. Every time he tried to interview for a finance position, the hiring manager would Google his name. The first result wasn't his LinkedIn profile. It was a Seattle Times article, "The Billionaire's Ex: How One Man Traded a Fortune for a Felony." Then came the federal trial. Jessica Thorne testified against him. She sat on the stand, looking innocent and tearful, painting Mark as the mastermind who coerced her poor, confused father into cooking the books. It was a lie, of course. Roger had been stealing since Mark was in diapers, but the jury didn't care. They saw a man who had abandoned his wife for a boss's daughter, and they hated him on principle. Mark was sentenced to 48 months in a federal correctional facility for conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The day he reported to prison, it was raining. He stood outside the chain-link fence, waiting for processing. He looked down at his wrist, instinctively checking for a watch that was no longer there. He had sold it to pay his first month's rent in a dingy motel. Now, he didn't even have the motel. The long-wait prison wasn't like the movies. It wasn't violent gangs and shanks in the shower, at least not in minimum security. It was boring. It was grey. It was the crushing weight of time. But the worst part wasn't the food or the hard beds. It was the television in the common room. The inmates loved the news. And the news loved Titan. 6 months into his sentence, Mark was mopping the cafeteria floor when a breaking news segment came on CNN. Titan Blackwood Vanderbilt, the reclusive heiress who recently took the helm of the global investment giant, has just announced the acquisition of the historic Thorne Tower in downtown Seattle. She plans to rebrand it as the headquarters for her new non-profit. The camera cut to Titan. She looked breathtaking. She was wearing a cream-colored coat, standing at a podium, flashing a smile that Mark used to think was reserved for him. "We are building a future where financial literacy is a right, not a privilege," Titan told the reporters. "We want to ensure that no partner is ever left in the dark about their family's finances again." The cafeteria erupted in laughter. "Hey, Sterling!" A guy named Big Mike yelled, pointing a plastic spoon at the TV. "That's your wife, right? Man, you really fumbled the bag. You fumbled the whole damn bank." Mark kept his head down, scrubbing a spot of dried ketchup on the linoleum until his knuckles turned white. He couldn't escape her. She was on magazine covers in the prison library. She was mentioned in the Wall Street Journal left by the guards. She was everywhere, growing brighter and more magnificent, while he was rotting away in a jumpsuit that smelled of industrial detergent. He realized then that she wasn't just punishing him with lawsuits. She was punishing him by succeeding. She was proving to the world that he was the anchor she had cut loose so she could fly. The release 4 years later. Mark walked out of the prison gates with a plastic bag containing his release papers and a bus ticket. He was 32 years old, but he looked 45. His hair had thinned significantly, and the stress lines around his eyes were permanent trenches of regret. He had no family waiting for him. His parents, humiliated by the scandal and the loss of their home, had moved to Florida and stopped answering his calls 2 years ago. Jessica was long gone. Rumor had it she married a plastic surgeon in Los Angeles. Mark Sterling was alone. He moved into a halfway house on the outskirts of Tacoma. He applied for jobs: analyst, bookkeeper, bank teller. Rejection, rejection, rejection. Mr. Sterling, a manager at a used car lot, told him, looking at his application with disdain, "You have a federal conviction for fraud. I can't let you near a cash register. I can't even let you near the keys." Desperation forced his hand. He walked into Sparky's Auto Lube, a greasy, run-down garage off the I-5 highway. The owner, a man with grease permanently etched into his skin, didn't ask for a resume. He asked if Mark could work nights and if he could keep his mouth shut. Mark said yes, the night of the ghost. It was a Tuesday in November, a year after his release. The rain in the Pacific Northwest was relentless, a cold sheet of water that turned the world into a blurred watercolor painting. Mark was working the graveyard shift. He was the pit guy, the one who stood in the concrete trench beneath the cars, unscrewing oil pans while hot sludge dripped onto his face. It was grueling, miserable work. He made $14 an hour. Around 9 p.m., the bell in the service bay rang. Mark wiped his hands on a filthy rag and climbed out of the pit. He expected a beat-up Honda or a contractor's truck. Instead, a Phantom sat in the bay. It was a Rolls-Royce Spectre, the new electric model. It was midnight blue, sleek and silent, looking like a spaceship that had crash-landed in this dirty garage. The paint was so polished it reflected the flickering fluorescent lights of the shop like a mirror. Mark froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. Cars like this didn't come to Sparky's. They went to the dealership. The driver's window rolled down. A man in a chauffeur's cap looked out. It wasn't Arthur. Arthur must have retired. This was a younger man, sharp and professional. "We have a low tire pressure warning," the driver said. "We're heading to a gala at the Museum of Flight and can't risk a flat. Can you check it? Quickly, please." "Yes, sir," Mark stammered. He pulled his hat lower over his eyes. He grabbed the air hose and walked around the car. He knelt by the rear passenger tire. The rubber was warm. The rim was made of carbon fiber. As he unscrewed the valve cap, he glanced up. The rear windows were tinted, but the interior lights were on. He saw her. Titan was sitting in the back seat. She was wearing a gown of shimmering silver silk that pooled around her like liquid mercury. A diamond necklace, delicate but clearly worth millions, rested against her throat. She was looking at a tablet, her face illuminated by the soft blue light of the screen. She looked peaceful. The sharp edges of the woman who had destroyed him in the conference room were gone. In their place was a quiet, unshakable confidence, but she wasn't alone. Sitting next to her was a man. He wasn't a business tycoon in a suit. He was wearing a tuxedo, but he wore it with the ease of someone who didn't care about it. He had a kind face, laugh lines around his eyes, and rough, calloused hands that rested gently on Titan's knee. Mark recognized him. Not from the news, but from the neighborhood. It was David. He used to own the small bakery 3 blocks from their old apartment on 4th Avenue. Mark had mocked him once, calling him a flower rat who would never amount to anything. David was whispering something to Titan. She threw her head back and laughed, a genuine, full-throated sound that pierced the glass and stabbed Mark straight in the heart. It was the sound of a woman who was safe, a woman who was loved. "He makes me happy, Arthur," Titan had said to the driver years ago. Mark remembered that. He looked at David. David wasn't rich, or at least he hadn't been. But looking at the way he looked at Titan, like she was the only light in the universe, Mark realized David was the richest man alive. Mark finished filling the tire. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped the valve cap. He stood up and tapped on the driver's window. "All set," he croaked, his voice rasping. The driver nodded. "Thank you." Suddenly the rear window rolled down. Mark wanted to run. He wanted to dissolve into the oil-stained concrete, but he couldn't move. He stood there, paralyzed, the rain plastering his cheap uniform to his skin. Titan looked out. She didn't look angry. She didn't look vindictive. She looked at him with the polite, distant curiosity one might offer a stray dog. Her eyes swept over his name tag, Mark, then up to his greased, stained face, his thinning hair, his broken posture. She recognized him. He saw the flicker in her eyes. The memory of 3 years of marriage, of the divorce papers, of the betrayal. Mark held his breath, waiting for the blow, waiting for her to say, "Look at you now." But she didn't. She turned to David, who was also looking out. "Do we have cash, honey?" she asked softly. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a bill. He handed it to Titan. Titan extended her hand out the window. Her manicured fingers held a crisp $100 bill. "Here," she said to Mark. Her voice was kind, impersonal. "Get yourself something warm to eat. It's a cold night." Mark stared at the money. It was the ultimate dismissal. She wasn't yelling at him because he didn't matter enough to yell at. To her, he wasn't the villain of her life anymore. He was just a mechanic in the rain. He was a nobody. He reached out with a trembling, dirty hand and took the bill. Their fingers didn't touch. "Thank you, ma'am," he whispered. "Drive on, please," Titan said to the chauffeur, rolling the window up. The Rolls-Royce pulled away, its taillights glowing red in the mist. Mark watched it go. He watched until it turned the corner and vanished, taking the light, the warmth, and the future he had thrown away with it. He stood alone in the dark, wet service bay. The rain mixed with the grease on his face. He looked down at the $100 bill. It was more money than he had in his pocket. He crumpled it in his fist and fell to his knees. A guttural scream tore from his throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated loss that echoed off the metal walls of the garage. He had signed the papers, mocking her. He had called her poor. He had left her for a better future. And now he was exactly where he belonged. In the mud, holding the charity of the wife he threw away, realizing too late that she had been the only thing of value he ever held. And that, my friends, is the devastating end of Mark Sterling. He spent his life chasing gold, convinced that his worth was measured by the status of the people he associated with. He was so blinded by the glitter of a fake life that he couldn't see the diamond he held in his own hands. Titan didn't destroy him with a gun or a weapon. She destroyed him with the truth. She let him experience the world exactly as he had designed it, cold, transactional, and unforgiving. The ending wasn't about revenge, it was about reality. Mark wanted a world where money defined worth, and in the end, he got it. He became worthless. This story reminds us of a terrifying truth. The people we hurt don't just disappear. They grow. They thrive. And sometimes the harshest punishment isn't their anger. It's their pity. So here is the question of the day. Do you think Titan's indifference was the perfect revenge, or should she have acknowledged who he was in that final moment? Was giving him that $100 bill an act of kindness, or the ultimate insult? I want to see your debates in the comments below. If this story gave you chills, please hit that like button. It helps the algorithm share these stories with more people. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We have a shocking story coming up next week about a runaway bride who discovers her fiancé's family secret at the altar. You do not want to miss it. Thanks for watching, stay humble, and remember, The toes you step on today might be attached to the foot that kicks you tomorrow.